It is now my pleasure to give you Professor Andrew Scott.
Well, good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. That pleasure was only increased this morning when I looked out and saw the sunrise and heard that it was snowing in London, so it's fantastic to be here. And it's great, too, to be among such a great cast. You really have got a tremendous team of experts, so congratulations to the organisers for putting it together. Now, it's been suggested that I should focus on the topic of longevity and work, so that'll be the main thing I'll focus on. I'm going to base my comments around my book, The 100-Year Life, which was written with my colleague at London Business School, Linda Grattan. Linda's a psychologist and I'm an economist. And I wanted to write the book because I was just increasingly frustrated around the standard narrative about aging and an aging society. And I'm pleased to say the book's done brilliantly. It's been a sort of international bestseller, and I'd like to think that's because we crafted a beautiful book, but I think that's because actually increasingly societies around the world are wanting a different dialogue around aging. They want one around longevity. Because my fundamental thesis is that this is actually really about time. Not aging, it's about time. And given the increases in life expectancy that Laura has said has already happened and is likely to come, we have a lot more time. But we don't see it like that. We see it as about aging. And that's because we see this extra time through the existing social narratives that we have. We see it through our existing structures of time. And the structure of time that we created in the 20th century involved a three-stage life. One of education, followed by work, followed by retirement. And viewed within the confines of that three stages, more life is about end of life. It's about aging. But we don't have to stick with those existing structures of time. If we have more time, we can structure time differently. That is what we are already doing and what you're going to see more and more. We're living our lives differently because we have more time. And to focus just on aging is, to me, to fundamentally misrepresent what this means. More time is about all of life and not just end of life. And to call it aging seems to me to misrepresent entirely the issue. Today in the UK, 78-year-olds have the mortality risk of 65-year-olds from 100 years ago. That doesn't seem anything about aging. That seems to be the opposite of aging. It's about being younger for longer. We have more time. How do we want to structure that time, and how should we use it? So let me sort of build on this thesis about having more time. So let me ignore the first 20 years of your life. You can forget about all those youthful indiscretions you had. I want to ignore the last 10 years of your life, and I'm going to give you a weekend, and I'm going to give you some time to sleep and relax at the end of the day. But everything else I want to call productive hours. And if you live to 70, you have around about 120,000 productive hours. But if you live to 100, as Laura was saying, this generation coming through have a very plausible likelihood of achieving, then they have nearly an extra 100,000 hours. And so the question you have to answer, or we as a society have to answer, is what do we want to do with those extra 100,000 hours? Now, we're already seeing everyone asking this question. We see people in retirement who now have a lot more time saying, how should I spend my retirement? And we're redesigning retirement. I see people in their 20s behaving very, very differently because they have, I think, a lot more time. The average age of marriage in the US now is closer to 30 than 20. The average age at which you have your first child is 30 rather than 20. People are making those traditional adult commitments much later than they used to, because when life lasts for longer, options become more important. You don't commit so early. You investigate the options available to you. And then, of course, it's not just those who are 20 or those who are 70 who are looking at living life differently. So too people in their 40s are. Because I'm going to suggest later that if you're in your mid-40s, you've got more work to come than you've done already, which is a very sobering thought and a different way of looking at life. So we're seeing people in their 40s behave differently. Last year in the UK, for the first time ever, you are more likely as a woman to have a child in your 40s than you were under 20. We've never seen that before. We are seeing major changes in how we restructure life. And my feeling is a three-stage life really cannot survive this extension out. Now, one of the things we know we're going to have to do with this extra time if we're living to 100 is work. There's kind of no way out of this. If we're going to live for longer, we either have to save more or work more. And given most people's attitude towards savings, the answer is going to have to be that we're going to have to work more. And according to the calculations I've looked at, when I look at sort of average savings and average rates of return, if you're in your mid-40s and you want a pension that's worth, say, 50% of your final salary, you're probably working to your early to mid-70s. And if you're 20, you're probably working to your late 70s or your early 80s. And this is sort of the bit of the talk that it just depresses everyone. We said to the publisher when we wrote the book, we can either call the book 100-Year Life or a 60-year career. Which do you think would sell best? They said, we think 100-year life's going to be much more appealing. I hate these generational labels, baby boomers, millennials. I think they really aren't very informative. But perhaps one reason why millennials are behaving different in the workplace is they know they've got a long time in that workplace. Why make a rush to start? And I'm certainly not thinking about a job for life with you if I've got a 60-year career ahead of me. So we're going to have to think about things in a very, very different way. And what frustrates me when I look at so much of the conversation around how we respond to longevity is everyone's really trying to play around with the parameters of the three-stage life. It's about let's push back the retirement age, let's lower the pension rate or increase the savings. But it really doesn't work. There isn't a way of salvaging the three-stage life in a way that works to over 100. When I first started giving this talk at the business school, and I was often talking to 40, 50-year-old executives on corporate programs, and I would say to them, you're going to have to work for longer, you're living longer. And the general reaction was, shit. Okay? And I was sort of a problem here, because I'm telling people that they're going to, on average, live for longer than they previously thought. And that they were going to be healthier for longer, and the reaction is, shit. This should be something we can make something good, but if we just stretch that three-stage life to try and make it last over 100, it doesn't work. In the 20th century, we invented teenagers. In the 20th century, we invented retirees. In the 21st century, we are inventing whole new stages and ages of life to match this greater longevity. Now, the reason we think so many people sort of seemed disheartened when we said they're going to live for longer and be healthier for longer was you think about what supports a good life, we have this asset framework in mind. On the left-hand side are your financial assets, your savings, your pensions, your health. Then your right-hand side are what we call your intangible assets, and we think there's three main buckets of those. The first is your productive skills, the skills and knowledge that get you through your career, what you learn at college, but also your peer group, your professional peer group who you learn so much from. Then there's your vitality assets, and they're of two forms. They're your physical and mental fitness, but also your friends and relationships. And study after study says that what matters in life is your friends and relationships. Money makes you happier, it doesn't make you happy. For close friends, close relationships, the ability to love, to create the space to love and be loved is what makes people happy. And then the final part of your intangible assets, which we think hasn't been very important, but will become increasingly important, we call your transformational assets, your ability to deal with change. Because in a three-stage life, you don't get much change, but in a long life full of many changes, you're going to have to be much more flexible about your identity and who you are and what you're doing. And if you think about these assets, if you just take the three-stage life and try and stretch it over 100, it solves the financial problem. You work longer, you earn more, therefore you can have a longer retirement. But if all you do is stretch out that second stage of work, look what's happening to your intangible assets. There's nothing you can learn at 20 that'll still be valid in the time you hit 70 or 75. And think about the technology coming down the line and how that comment's going to get even stronger. We're going to think about major upgrades to education later in life. Think about your mental and physical health. With a 60-year career working the type of hours we demand from careers, it isn't going to work. And relationships, you can't buy a lifelong friend at aged 80. It's something you have to invest in right the way through your life. So if we think about the three-stage life, it was designed in the 20th century for a life expectancy around 70. It worked. It cannot be stretched to make life last for 100. So the three-stage life is already breaking up. Retirement is no longer a singular concept where everyone at the same age comes to a hard stop. It's been reinvented many times over. We are seeing the creation of a multi-stage life. And with a multi-stage life, you might have one stage of your career which is about making money, one stage of your career, a better work-life balance, one may be about exploration and self-discovery, another may be about putting something back into the community. And you will have in this multi-stage life many shifts of identity, many shifts of what you need to know and how you need to behave. You're going to have to be comfortable with your transformational assets. And with this comes some major changes to how we see careers. We see the end of lockstep. William Faulkner once said that if you ever fall out of lockstep, you get trampled underfoot. In a three-stage life, we had a linear career. You leave college, you start your career, and it goes upwards or it goes sideways. But if you tell me your age, I know the stage of your career. You tell me you're 21, I know you just graduated. You tell me you're 40, I know you're middle management. You tell me you're 60, I know you're thinking about retirement. With a three-stage life, there's only one way of arranging it. Education, work, retirement. You can't work first and then have your education. You can't retire first and then work. But in a multi-stage life, I can structure my life in lots of different ways. I could do the money-making first and the social stuff later, or I can flip it around. One of the things that shaped my book was my middle child at the end of his university. He said, "Dad, I'm not going to get a job. I'm going to travel for 2 or 3 years." I was kind of upset about this. I was anxious, because when I graduated, if you didn't get a job straight away, what was wrong with you? Weren't you committed? Did you have a challenge? Did you not like this idea of work? 3 years later, he's just started work on a graduate for a large consulting firm on the graduate training program. He's 24. I said, "Louis, aren't you one of the oldest?" He said, "No, I'm the youngest. We go from 24 to 31. That's the graduate recruitment program of a consulting company." What we're seeing is a whole bunch of new HR issues begin to emerge. Do I carry on bothering with a graduate recruitment program if people aren't going to be with me forever? What about all those 20, 30-year-olds in Brooklyn, in Shoreditch, in London, playing around with a form of entrepreneurship which doesn't bring in much money, so that when they're in their 30s, they're going to want to get a mainstream job? They're terribly creative and innovative, but they're not at all house-trained. How do I get people who used to be senior roles carry on working in less senior roles because they still want to, but with more flexible hours? How do I de-link age and pay? Because one of the reasons so many people lose their job in their 50s is their pay is going up with their age, but their productivity isn't. So how do we create within the framework of work more flexible ways of doing things? How do I think about learning and development when someone who's age 30 is not going to be with me for another 30 years? What we're seeing right now is a major change in how we live our life, and we're seeing a major change in how we structure our careers. That multi-stage life is beginning to emerge with serious transitions and changes in between. Our children are going to live a length of life and a career structure that is really so different from the one that we were used to. Our society is based around a technology and a longevity that has created a notion of work that is no longer underpinned by the same technology and the same longevity. We're going to see a massive social experiment as we find out how best to use these times, and we're going to see corporates start to adjust accordingly. Not all corporates are responding. Most want nothing to do with this. They're behind what individuals are demanding from them. What you're going to see is those firms where people matter most, where human capital is most important, will be the most adept at responding. We're going to move away from standardization, more and more towards customization, a world where age is no longer stage. This is the beginning of a major social experiment. We're about 10 or 20 years into it. We have another 30, 40 years to come. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.